Learn anything, anytime, anywhere education. Whichcollege.co.
Aromagees Botanica, a metaphysical store for mind, body, and spirit. Oils, herbs, candles, crystals, teas, handmade soaps, tarot cards, everything you need on your magical journey. Daily psychic and tarot readings, classes, witchcraft, pagan, and hoodoo supplies, most of it made in-house. Try our free dress your own candle station. From spiritual gifts to ritual supplies to religious books, we have the widest selection of metaphysical products in all of Tennessee since 1999. It is our goal to inspire everyone to explore their spirituality in their own way by offering information and products in a nurturing multicultural environment. Open 7 days a week. 223 Donaldson Pike, Nashville, Tennessee, or visit us online at aromagees.com.
Hi, this is Marianne Kay from My Mystic Gems, and I create magical items for everyday life. My handcrafted items include wire-wrapped crystals and gemstones, beautiful bullets, which is part of my Peace project, steampunk jewelry and cosplay accessories, and retro and vintage items. I can do custom designs for birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, weddings, and costume affairs. Please visit my website at mymysticgems.com and also my Etsy website at mymysticgems.etsy.com.
Hey folks, it is your boy, the Millennial Magician, coming to you with another episode of the Millennial Magician Archives. This episode and the following 2 or 3 episodes are going to be dedicated specifically to the ancestors and ancestor magic. Today's episode is going to be a lecture that I presented for the Between the Veils conference that happened a couple of weeks ago. So I will run through what I taught at that event. And then the next episode is going to be a technique or techniques for constructing a simple and a complex ancestor altar. And then following that, the episode will be about different kinds of magic and different types of healing and different things that can be done at the ancestor altar with the power and the help of the ancestors. So I hope you find these next couple of episodes helpful And as always, thank you for joining. The title of the presentation that I did was called Magic at the Ancestor Altar. What we are going to go over today as a part of this workshop, or for this episode specifically, is some ancestor theology, which is really a theology is really just a way to organize some beliefs and help them make sense within the context of God or spirituality as something that can be organized and used to help us understand life. We'll talk about some classes of ancestors. I'll give some examples of ancestors. I'll talk about ways to feed the ancestors and things to think about when you are feeding them. I personally developed an individual, like individual to me ritual to elevate ancestors. I have gotten feedback from my spiritual ancestors and my familial ancestors that this way of working with them is absolutely beneficial. It's legit. And it's based off of the idea of a novena prayer. So it does take place over the course of 9 nights or 9 consecutive hours. And then I'll talk a little bit about the construction of ancestors, and I'll talk about some spells and workings, but I'm going to save the construction and the spells for following episodes. Boom, right into it. Ancestor or ancestral theologies. This is basically what we believe about ancestors, the purpose for honoring them, venerating them, and just the why behind why we do what we do. Point blank period, first thing to understand, first thing to reconcile when doing any kind of ancestral magic, when channeling ancestral energy or the energy that your family has. And every family has ancestors, every family has ancestral energy, every family has a family spirit. Whether or not you come from a magical family or your family has heavy Christian leanings or Hebrew leanings or Pentecostal leanings or Jehovah's Witness leanings or Buddhist leaning, all of this is a part of that ancestral spirit. The ways that the ways that our families interact with God is part of how we interact with that family spirit. And the first thing to reconcile is that our ancestors love us. Our ancestors love us, even if when we had a relationship with them when they were alive, the relationship wasn't that robust or wasn't, it left something to be desired. Once they pass away and they become an ancestor, that that component of the relationship is almost a little irrelevant to them. When they become ancestors, when they cross over to the other side, they get some insight into their life and the mistakes they made and their parts on disagreements and all of the above. And so this insight helps them come to a place where they love us deeply and unconditionally, despite some of the ways that we still live our lives. So, for example, you have a parent who passed away, and in life, they really struggled with your queer identity. Well, once they become an ancestor, they no longer struggle with that, and they love you because that is a part of your component, or is that is a component of your identity. Next, our ancestors from way back when all the way to the most recent, they put the best and unfortunately the worst of themselves into us. We are built up of everything that made them strong, and we are built up of a bunch of their perceived limitations as well. And we are manifestations of that. So we get our strengths from them and we get our limitations from them. We might be super duper fast and strong. We also might be diabetic. We might be very, very intelligent, also bipolar. Is an example of the best and the worst that comes to us from our ancestors. 2, our ancestors being deceased, being on another plane of existence, being a part of another journey or the next part of their journey that comes after the physical. They've got insight that we do not have. They have knowledge that we do not have. They can see further down the quote unquote timeline than we can. And they also have amazing empathy for the human condition because they were alive at one point. We are our ancestors' greatest achievements. Many of us have ancestors who suffered through tremendously awful conditions. Some of us have ancestors who were slaves. Some of us have ancestors who were indentured servants. Some of us have ancestors who were immigrants. Some of us have ancestors who were forced into a life of crime to help survive or help provide for family members. Us being free, us having the freedom to do or choose how we behave, to choose who we love, to choose who we get into relationships with. That is a great achievement. Our ancestors are a source of strength, and they represent a direct access to the spirit world. They are closer in proximity to us than maybe some of the gods that we look to are. So working with them, channeling them, using their place in the spirit world as a place where we can tap in, get some information, might very well be a lot easier for some of us to do magically, psychically, spiritually than, immediately going to a more distant deity or, a deity that might be further away on a different plane of existence. Not to say that it's not possible. We know that drawing down the moon, aspecting, and all those practices are absolutely possible. However, I do believe that practicing these skills with ancestors and spirit guides makes us a lot better at doing these skills when it comes to deities. You want to aspect Osiris very, very truthfully. You want to channel Isis very truthfully and to the best of your ability. With very little spiritual side effects. Perfect that skill by channeling your ancestors, by channeling great great grandma, great great grandpa, by channeling and working with spirit guides to help, with the energetic attunement needed to help you with that skill working with deity. And then 5, Our work with our ancestors is co-creational, meaning we do something, they do something. We add to the collaboration, they add to the collaboration. There's a future that we want to see, there's a future that they want to see. With their insight on their part of the veil and with our ability to manipulate in the physical world, we can amplify our strength and we can put some things into motion working together. So, collaboration, co creationally, teammates is what I mean when I say that the work that we do with them is co creational. If we support our ancestors spiritually from our side of the veil, they are better able to support us from their side of the veil. So, 5 components to ancestor theology. Of course, there's a lot more that can be said about honoring, venerating, and uplifting ancestors, but these 5 components right here are a great place to start, or a great place to learn how to deepen as you perfect and enliven and embrace your relationship with your ancestors. I recognize 5 classes of ancestors. The familial ancestors are the ones that we get our genetic makeup from. These are the ones that have the similar chromosomal makeup. Our familial ancestors are our biological grandmothers and grandfathers, our mothers, our fathers, our aunties, our uncles, our cousins, our sisters, our brothers. And when we pass away, the people who are biologically in those roles as well. In this place, I do also place adoptive relatives. So if you have a really special and close relationship with a step parent and they embraced you as their own and you accepted them as your own, I would also put familial ancestors, put those relationships in the familial ancestors. We've also got ideological ancestors. These are people who share with us maybe inventions. These are people who might have pioneered new ways of thinking. So people who study physics or who are physicists might consider that Albert Einstein and his theory of relativity make him an ideological ancestor. If you are someone who is a feminist, maybe Susan B. Anthony or Elizabeth Cady Stanton might be ideological ancestors. If you are someone who is about emancipation, then maybe Frederick Douglass might be your ideological ancestor. These are people who pass on ideas and inventions. So let's see, the Model T, first car, Henry T. Ford, ideological ancestor. Alexander Graham Bell, telephone, ideological ancestor who paved the way for us to eventually have the cell phone. Next class of ancestor, we got relational. This is an example of a relational ancestor, or the benefits of relational ancestors is if you get some kind of benefit due to a relationship. So if you got a grandpa who was a Freemason and your family got a bunch of advantages based on that, the people that maybe your grandfather introduced you to might be relational ancestors. If you are a part of a sorority or a fraternity and you are considered a legacy, then that is an example of how relational ancestors work or come about. If you are a part of a particular profession, and that profession affords you advantages, maybe a type of status or what have you, the relationship between you and maybe the head of that profession, or like the big wigs in that profession, the people that present at conferences for a particular profession. Once they pass away, you continue to talk about their achievements or what they gave to the field. Those would be examples of relational ancestors. And of course, there's some crossover here between ideological and relational here. So Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung and Albert Ellis and B.F. Skinner could be both ideological ancestors to the field of psychology, as well as relational ancestors if they were also a part of the psychiatric organization Psychi. Environmental ancestors are ancestors who pass on knowledge and appreciation related to the world around us, the physical world. Ancestors who teach us how to irrigate, ancestors who gave us the knowledge to build a great arch, the ancestor who gave us the peanut, the ancestor who helped us understand or recognize that willow bark contains some pain relief substance in it, and how to harvest that while also maintaining the environment, would be an environmental ancestor. Not every ancestor becomes super famous or well known, and not every ancestor takes on the role or the idea or the status of an elevated ancestor. An elevated ancestor is an ancestor who, through their achievements in life and their ongoing participation with the physical world after death, receive a status of being elevated. An elevated ancestor is venerated across regions. So an elevated ancestor is likely to be known on the east coast of the United States and the west coast of the United States. Che Guevara might be an example of an elevated ancestor. And so I do have some examples of elevated ancestors, but just know that an elevated ancestor, like, they do have a family, they likely have descendants, they likely were driven by their ideas, they likely had relationships that were beneficial, and they likely had a relationship with the environment. However, the things that brought them elevation is they got famous, they got super duper well known. And they got celebrated for those achievements, and those achievements had a a ripple effect across time, across history. So when I talk to you about, or when I show you these elevated ancestors next, you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about when I say, oh, like, they are known across region and their influence had a ripple effect throughout history. So of course, Mama Moses, aka Harriet Tubman, is an example of an elevated ancestor. Malcolm X, also an example of an elevated ancestor. You might also argue that depending on what organization you're a part of, Malcolm X might also be an ideological ancestor or a relational ancestor. Harriet Tubman, being an abolitionist, might be an ideological ancestor or a relational ancestor if you consider yourself an abolitionist. However, their names are said multiple times. There are works that are done to celebrate their legacy, to spread the word about them. And we can recognize the role that they played in history. So, examples of elevated ancestors. Toni Morrison, phenomenal author, might be an example of an ideological ancestor. Left us several works that we can look at again and again and again, published, taught lectures and workshops. Also might be elevated, venerated by people who are authors, people who write stories or books from a historical context or from a very specific perspective. Many people know who Toni Morrison is. Movies were made off of some of her works. So if you've ever read the book Beloved, you know that that is also a movie that's got Oprah Winfrey, Danny Glover, and I want to say Tandy Newton in it. George Washington Carver, famous for giving us the peanut, elevated ancestor, also environmental ancestor. Maya Angelou, poet, motivational speaker, all round badass, elevated ancestor, also ideological ancestor. W.E.B. Du Bois, another example of an elevated ancestor. All of these 6 individuals that were depicted here, their names are known in different parts of the country, in the United States for sure, also probably known in other parts of the world as well for the work that they've done to change lives, to change the course of history. When it comes to feeding the ancestors, consistency is key. So, one of the first pieces of advice that I do give is feed the ancestors weekly. Pick a day of the week that is your day to work with them. And on this day, you celebrate every aspect of your day with them. You give them fresh water in the morning, you give them some coffee in the morning. If you smoke a cigarette with them on your mind. You know, you go outside, stand on your porch, smoke your cigarette, say your little prayer to the ancestors, Thanksgiving, this, that, and the third, all of the above, what have you. Doing it weekly is less important than doing it consistently. So if you do it on the first of the month, boom, you do it on the first of the month. If you do it on a Friday, every Friday, boom, you do it every Friday. If you have a feast day for your ancestors and you do it once a year, boom, that's how you do it, once a year. But the point is to do it consistently. Continue to fortify that relationship on a regular basis. On the day that you do choose to work with your ancestors, let's say you do pick weekly as your preferred go-to. Let's say you pick the end of the week. Maybe the end of the week for you is a Friday. You wake up Friday, you get up, you wash your face, you brush your teeth, all that jazz. You go to your ancestor altar, you light their candle, you remove any water, any liquids, any solids, any leftover candles, any of the stuff from last week's offering and workings, and you put those where they need to go. Leftover water, maybe use it to water a plant. Leftover food that hasn't gone bad, leftover offerings, maybe you just throw that in nature, perhaps the squirrels or the pigeons or whatever, we'll get to it. And you kind of get rid of that in a safe, ethical kind of way. And you start to go ahead and replenish it. So for me, what I will do is I will add some water to their shot glasses, 2 shot glasses. One is for water. I will add a shot of whiskey, rum, vodka. Um, I don't go with liqueur because I don't want it to rot. Um, but water and definitely some liquor, a spirit, so to speak. And I give that to them. I do also have some cologne that I think is great that me and my ancestors agree is a great offering. So that'll get sprayed at the altar as well. And then if I'm having coffee, I will also just throw in a K cup and put some coffee in their special cup and bring that back to the altar. If I'm brewing coffee, from like a Mr. Coffee maker, not using Keurig, then I will just pour some right out of the carafe into their little cup. I will not add sugar. I will not add cream to theirs. They get it just black. And, I'll say a morning prayer to them. Thanks for, helping me to wake up in my bed. Thanks for a peaceful night's sleep. Thanks for any dreams that I might have or might remember. And I might just sit right next to the altar for a moment, write some stuff down in the journal, in the grimoire, what have you, and just have that moment reflecting on me, myself, my living family, and if there's anything that I can do to support them. So I might also incorporate a prayer for my living family at the ancestor altar. And boom, that's the morning component. I go on about the first half of my day. If that means a shower, then it's a shower. If it means running errands, then it's running errands. If it means chilling out for a little bit and working on, any schoolwork, if I have any clients or patients for the day, if I'm doing any readings, if I have to organize my schedule for the day, then that's what happens. And I go on about that. And then when it's time for lunchtime, if I'm at home, then I make some lunch for myself. And whatever I have for myself, I do portion off and I give that to them as well. So if I'm making myself a sandwich, then I cut it into fours maybe and I give them a quarter. Or I make myself two sandwiches and I cut one of them into fours and I give them a quarter of it. If I'm having leftover food, leftover chicken, leftover rice, leftover greens, leftover macaroni, leftover what have you, I just take one spoonful and I put it on their special plate, one spoonful of everything that I'm eating. And I put that on their altar and I say a prayer of offering and a prayer of thanksgiving. And I pray that they accept it and they appreciate it and so on and so forth. Then I go on about my business and I eat mine. As a rule, any food that I give to my ancestors, I also eat myself. Anything that I put on their altar, I am also willing to consume for myself. I am not going to give them a bouquet full of dandelions if I know that I prefer to receive tulips or carnations. I'm not going to give them anything that is not fit for me to receive. And that is a way of making sure that I don't offend them or that I don't take their relationship for granted, or also as a way of letting them know that I am not going to just give them any old thing while I expect them to deliver to me just prime blessings. At the end of the day, I will go back to the altar, and if I'm drinking at the time, I will take a shot as a way of sharing a shot with them as well. If I am not drinking at the time, then I will give them another shot. And usually, if I'm not drinking, they know about it, and it's an agreement that I have with them. If I'm fasting from that, uh, I will light some incense for them. I'll light another candle, and I'll say another Thanksgiving prayer. Maybe at the end of the day, also, I will flip over some tarot cards or I'll throw some runes and just kind of give myself a reading for the week. If any of my family members have asked for any advice or insight over the course of the week, then I will use Ancestor Day to complete that reading as well. So I'll pull some cards for the family member, I'll throw some runes for the family member, or I'll sit and meditate and see if, the ancestors have a more complete vision or any words or affirmations for me to share with my family. Additionally, when it comes to feeding the ancestors, celebrating the holidays with them. If you celebrate Christmas, if you celebrate Thanksgiving, if you celebrate Easter, if you celebrate the Sabbats, then whatever you take for yourself, give them a portion. These are also great times to add things that they would enjoy or that you mutually enjoy to the altar. So some pretty crystals, if you know the death day and the birthday of your ancestors, then maybe a stone that's their birthstone might be appropriate to give a particular ancestor, on their birthday as a way of celebrating that relationship. The food that you eat on Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, or the Sabbats, on any of the feast days. Again, just take a spoonful of each thing. So, potato salad, give them a spoonful. Corn pudding, give them a spoonful. Collard greens, give them a spoonful. Candied yams, give them a spoonful. Piece of turkey, give them a slice. Put some gravy on it. Put a chime candle right in the center of it. And just go ahead and put it on the altar. When it comes to food and things that'll spoil, you want to make sure that nothing spoils on the ancestor altar. You want to make sure that you put the stuff on there and you get it off there, so that it doesn't rot, so that it won't attract any bugs, so that it won't attract any mold. If you put something on the ancestor altar, you go back the next day and it's already rotted, molded, and bugs are on it, you can take that as a sign that your ancestors didn't appreciate or accept the offering. And the more you engage in this practice, the more you'll start to recognize, like, yeah, the ancestors will definitely just leave some shit there, and like you will have to clean it up. Like they will be like, oh no, like baby, that's not for us. Like, what are you thinking? And one of the ways that you can make sure that things don't rot on the ancestor altar is that you can also give dried things that won't rot. You can give them some oats, you can give them some grits, you can give them some cornmeal, you can give them some dried beans, you can give them some dried rice, as a way of also making sure that you're giving them something energetically that you enjoy, that they enjoy, but the risk of it rotting is way less. Again, if you go back and your dried stuff is got bugs all over it, got ants crawling out of it or whatever, then you know that they didn't appreciate it, and you get it off the altar immediately. You clean out the vessels, you reconsecrate the vessels, and you try again. Also, keep in mind that you can consult the ancestors about what they would like as offerings. You can get you a little pendulum out, calibrate your pendulum. If it swings a certain way, that means yes. If it swings a certain way, that means no. If it swings a certain way, that means maybe, depends on the occasion. Calibrate your pendulum, and then you ask them, will you accept candles? Will you accept incense? Will you accept water? Will you accept food? If you are going to accept food, will you accept store-bought food, or does the food always have to be cooked at home? Will you accept food that had a cellophane or plastic wrapping around it? If you are accepting food, do I have to take a bite of it at the altar? These are all things that you can ask your ancestors, and get the meaning, get the response through your pendulum. You can go through the same process with your yes no coin if you've got one of those. So definitely do some communication with your ancestors regarding the types of offerings. Make sure stuff's not rotting on there, and make sure the stuff that you give them is stuff that you would be willing to receive as well. Right here, the ritual to elevate ancestors. This is written by me. I got inspiration from a bunch of different sources, and then, of course, I also did some work with my ancestors to help develop this ritual. If you want to try it out, you're free to try it out. I'm giving it to you freely. Ask your ancestors if they want, a novena ritual to help elevate and empower them. And if they're like, yeah, go ahead and ask them what are, some of the 9 things that they would like as offerings, or what are some of the 9 things that they would find most useful on their side of the veil. But basically, for this, what you will need are candles. So you'll either need one candle that will burn for the entirety of the ritual. So for about 30 minutes, over the course of 9 different incarnations of the ritual, so to speak. So, like a novena ritual is a ritual that is done either over the course of 9 days or over the course of 9 hours, and you start it, on the hour every hour. And you want the candle to burn while you're doing the work, and the work can take, from a few minutes to a half hour. So obviously, this elevation ritual is a devotion as well. So it will definitely take some time. So even if doing each thing only takes a half hour, you're going to have to do it 9 times. So you'll need some candles, either one candle that will burn, and you put it out like at the conclusion of each component of the novena. Or you can use 9 chimes or 9 tea lights and let each of those burn out. You'll also need some images of the deceased. If you are just building a singular ancestor altar, maybe you think it might be helpful to have images of many ancestors. So if you got a grandma, a grandpa, an older sister, a mom, a dad, some aunties, uncles, or what have you, some cousins who have gone on before, and that altar is dedicated to the entire ancestral spirit, you get plenty of uh, pictures, multiple pictures of these people. If you have an ancestor altar that's already up and running and someone new passes away, then for this ritual, you'll get a picture of them and you'll exalt it by maybe bringing it forward. And you address the ritual just specifically to the one who has passed away. Whereas on the Feast of Your Ancestors or on a special Friday or maybe even on Samhain or Halloween, you address the elevation ritual to the entire ancestral family. But so yeah, images of the deceased for whom the altar is for. You'll also want some incense. You want a bell, a cup or a bowl, and a plate. Some holy oil or some ancestor oil, of course. And then here, as far as offerings go, I said some coins, some cakes, some liquor, some water, some ancestor money, some tobacco, some cologne or perfume, beans and rice, and coffee are all appropriate offerings. However, you can do 9 different offerings that you feel are appropriate. If you want to offer them a special athame, a special sword, or something that you're only going to be using for the ancestors or only going to be using with them, then that might be an example of something that you might offer to them. If you do pray the rosary, or you have a version of the rosary that you really appreciate, then using a rosary as an offering also appropriate. But the whole point is that this is a novena ritual. You do it 9 times, and each time you want to have a new offering for them. As far as this template goes, you start off every part of the novena. So every time you approach the altar from hour 1 all the way to hour 9, you always do what are called some main prayers. Do your main prayer to your God and your goddess. If you're familiar with the Catholic Rosary, you might recognize this as the Our Father. You might recognize the Hail Mary. You might recognize the Apostles' Creed as something that always happens when you do a rosary. But for this particular ritual, like, I am a witch, I am not a Catholic. I address this prayer to my patron deities. And these are the patron deities who preside over the dead or death. So this might be the Gede, this might be Hades and Persephone, Saint Martin de Porres, and Maman Brigitte or Saint Bridget. This might be Nephthys and Nuvis. This might be Isis and Osiris. But either way, you address a main prayer to the goddess and the god who preside over the dead, the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. Ask for strength, ask for blessings, offer them some water and some incense as a way of pulling them into the work as well. So you're gaining the attention of these upper gods and upper beings through prayer and through offering, so that they may also help to empower and uplift your ancestors. Then you offer a main prayer to what I refer to as the resolved ancestors. These are the ancestors that have already participated in some elevation kind of work. These are ancestors who have begun to appear in the dreams of you and your other living family members as ways of letting you know that they're looking out for you. Um, ask them to join you in the work as well. Ask them to come and get they kin. Um, as you lift your ancestors up, ask them to reach out and pull your ancestors closer to the light of deliverance, of evolution, and resolution. A resolved ancestor is an ancestor who has done work on their side of the veil to shed those beliefs that they had while they were living. So if an ancestor had some homophobia, and that ancestor is now working with you as a queer to help you gain opportunities to be successful, helping you in your relationships. I mean, like, wow, I never thought that like this ancestor would be working with me because they were just such a staunch homophobe when they were alive. That ancestor is showing you signs that they are resolved. And then after that, there's the main prayer to the ancestors in general that are going to be elevated, the ones that you are praying for. These can be resolved ancestors too, right? We can continue to pray for the uplifting, for the deliverance, and for the resolution and evolution of all our ancestors, not just the ones who, have not started working with family again, not just the ones who um, are recently deceased, right? We want to continue this ongoing process of elevating our ancestors and helping them to become resolved. But this main prayer to the ancestors that you are praying for, announce what you are praying for. I'm praying for the deliverance and the lifting up of Hattie Mae Pierce. That's Big Mama. So if any of you ever seen Big Mama's house, like it's not like actually a person that I know of. Um, I'm praying for Uncle Mac. I'm praying for Lady Peters, who might be, a member of your church or your circle or your coven, a relational ancestor. I'm praying that they are uplifted closer to the light of divinity. I'm praying that their heart is lighter than the feather of Ma'at. I am praying that they find their way into the sweet fields and that they find the summer lands comforting. Those are some examples of things that you might be praying for. And then immediately, depending on what hour you on, will determine the prayer that you use next. So for the first hour, you want to pray that your ancestors are forgiven for the poor choices that they made while they were alive. You praying for your husband who had a temper and was a hitter. Praying for that, that they're forgiven for that. The goddess forgives them for that. That the God forgives him for that. Um, and that the karma that was generated by these poor behaviors and poor choices gets resolved. And right away, with this first prayer, we start to see how elevating our ancestors also has an impact on us as well, because it takes some strength, it takes some faith, it takes some devotion to pray that people who were perhaps wrong to us, or who hurt us, um, get some forgiveness for some of the stuff that they put us through. Then you say your prayers, you say your main prayer, you say your first hour prayer. Maybe you have a chant that you have that is meant to further uplift them, that raises energy, and you direct that energy into the candle. The candle is lit, and you light that, and you make the first offering. Maybe it's coins, maybe it's water, but you make the first offering. You stare at the candle a little bit, you visualize your ancestor rising up and some of the chains that bind them, some of the things that kind of keep them tethered, or some of the karma that's unresolved. You maybe visualize that falling away. Maybe you visualize, a hand coming out of the clouds and pulling your ancestor up just a little bit, freeing them just a little bit, bringing them closer to a light that represents, an entire pantheon of gods that interacts with humans. Maybe they're going to a special place that, the ancestors are, at, where they're learning and growing and, reviewing their lives or what have you. You blow out the candle, you walk away from the altar, or if you're using a chime or a tea light candle, you let that one burn out, you let the incense go out naturally, and then you come back at the start of the second hour. And then you again say your main prayer to the God and Goddess. You say your main prayer to your resolved ancestors. You say your main prayer to the answers that you're praying for. And then you immediately move into your second hour prayer. May they be uplifted closer to the light of divinity, where they may dwell in peace, where they dwell in majesty, where they receive the divine blessings that they are entitled to. May they dwell in enlightenment. And again, you visualize the energy that you are raising for them, lifting them up from the physical plane, up through the planes of existence. And then you see your resolved ancestors or the hands of deities reaching down to pull them up even more. The shackles that are holding them back or that are keeping them unresolved are still falling away. You make your second offering. You do your chants, raise some more energy, push it into the candle that you have now lit for the second hour. Uh, or you have relit in the case of like a long burning novena candle. And then, once that part of the work is done for the second hour, boom, you blow out the candle or you let it burn down if it's a chime or a tea light. And you walk away and you go do something for the remaining time. Then, third hour approaches. You approach your altar, you ring your bell, you say your main prayer to the God and Goddess, you say your main prayer to the resolved ancestors, you address the ancestor that you're working with in particular, and you do your third hour prayer. May they be remembered for their hard work. If you remember any of their hard work, you say these things. You do your chants, you make your offerings, and if you're going to leave your candles lit, perhaps at this point now you have 3 very pretty candles lit, like maybe all the tea lights haven't gone out yet, maybe all the chimes haven't burned out yet, and it looks real pretty, and you starting to vibe with it. You walk away as long as it's safe to do so, or you put out your long burning novena candle. You let your incense go out on their own or what have you. Um, if the one from the first hour is still going, that's fine. If the one from the second hour is still going, that's fine. But either way, you leave the incense alone, you let it do what it's going to do. You walk away and you come back now for your fourth hour prayer. Again, you do your main prayer to the God and Goddess, you do your main prayer to your resolved ancestors, and you do the main prayer addressing the ancestor or the ancestors that you're working with. Ring your bell, make your offerings of whatever. Maybe it's cake, maybe it's a shot, maybe it's maybe it's a bundle of herbs that smell real pretty, and you burn those in your cauldron as the offering. And again, may they be forgiven for their poor choices they made while alive. And again, visualize that the energy that you raise from this act is lifting them up. They've got the hands from the resolved ancestors and the God and Goddess lifting them up, and they are being elevated. And you follow this pattern all the way through the ninth hour, making sure that, as you approach the altar, you're saying your main prayers, you're ringing your bell, you are saying the prayer appropriate for the hour. So forgiveness, uplifted, remembered. Forgiveness, uplifted, remembered. You say each prayer 3 times, right? 3 times 3 is 9. So you say each one is going to be said. Boom, there's the pattern right there. May they be remembered for their hard work is the last one that you do. Then after that, you let any candles that are remaining, like if, maybe candle 1, 2, and 3 have gone out by the time the ninth hour have got here. Maybe 4 and 5 have also gone out by the time hour 9 has got here. But maybe 6, 7, and 8 are still going. Let them all burn out. Let go of the incense. Let them finish doing what they're doing. You've made all 9 of your offerings. Once you were done, you just go ahead and you take the main picture that you were doing, that you were using to help you connect with them, and you put that on the wall, maybe next to the other ancestors. You place it back where maybe all the other ancestors' pictures are. You say a closing prayer. And for this work right here, you don't ask for anything. You're not asking for any blessings at this time. This is just you working for them. And you can do this whenever someone new passes away, as a way of getting them in closer contact with the ancestors who have gone before. You can do it on Halloween. You can do this maybe 3 times a year, 4 times a year, once every couple of months, as a way of making sure that your ancestors are continually elevated and uplifted, and that they are continually strong enough to do what you are asking them to do. So hopefully you like this and you recognize the power of this ritual to impact your ancestors' position, as well as your relationship to them and your family. And when we convene for the next episode of the Millennial Magician Archive, I will have some things out to show you for consideration when you are constructing your ancestor altar. Until next time, may you blessed be.